Imagine this. The year is 1189. The Mediterranean is a boiling cauldron of faith, politics, and blood. The banners of Christendom are already gathering for the Third Crusade, one of the most legendary military campaigns in history. Names like Frederick Barbarossa, Philip II of France, and most famously Richard the Lionheart echo across the chronicles of the time. But what if one of those names, perhaps the most iconic of all, never marched to the Holy Land? What if Richard, King of England, never came to the Third Crusade? This is the great question we'll dive into today. A scenario where the man celebrated as the Coeur de Lion, the heart of the Crusades, is absent. How would this change the balance of power? Would Saladin's victories be permanent? Would the city of Jerusalem ever see a cross hoisted above its walls again? And most importantly, would the myth of crusading itself survive without the larger-than-life presence of Richard I? This isn't just history, it's history rewritten. Welcome to Vertex of Time. And before we begin, remember, today's topic was suggested by one of our subscribers at Madriangaming4098. If you too want to see your ideas transformed into immersive explorations of the past, make sure to comment your suggestions below. We read every single one. And now, let's open the gates of possibility. In exploring this alternate history, we must first understand why Richard mattered so much. According to historian John Gillingham, one of the leading biographers of Richard I, no other king of England has so captured the imagination of contemporaries and posterity alike. His presence during the Third Crusade was not just military, it was symbolic. He embodied the knightly ideal, inspiring not only soldiers, but chroniclers, poets, and future generations. Now, if we strip that presence away, we must reconstruct the scene with very different dynamics. The crusading coalition would have leaned heavily on Philip II of France and the remnants of Barbarossa's forces after the Emperor S drowning in 1190. Without Richard's ships, money, and military brilliance at Acre and Arsif, the campaign would already start weakened. Historians like Thomas Asbridge, author of the Crusades, the authoritative history of the war for the Holy Land, remind us that the Third Crusade was not a clean victory, but it was a psychological triumph. The Crusades' greatest success, Asbridge writes, was not in capturing Jerusalem, but in restoring faith in the crusading ideal. Much of that was thanks to Richard's ferocity against Saladin, especially his tactical mastery at Arsif. In 1191, remove him, and the whole outcome looks bleak. Philip II was far less committed to the Holy Land. In fact, even with Richard present, Philip abandoned the crusade early and returned to France. Would he have stayed longer without Richard's rivalry? Some argue yes, but most likely, Philip was more interested in consolidating power in Europe. Without Richard as a balancing force, Philip might have left even earlier, leaving the crusade leaderless against Saladin. Let us imagine Acre. That city was the first great test of the Third Crusade. Richard's arrival with fresh troops and his naval supremacy turned the tide. Jonathan Phillips, in The Life and Legend of the Sultan Saladin, notes that Saladin himself regarded Richard as his most formidable opponent, a man whose presence galvanized the Crusaders into a renewed, almost fanatical vigor. Without Richard, Acre might not have fallen at all, or its siege could have dragged on, exhausting Crusader forces. This would mean no momentum, no morale boost, and potentially the complete unraveling of the Christian army in the East. But let us go further. Without Richard, the legend of the Lionheart never touches the Crusades. The mythic clash between Saladin and Richard, the one chroniclers painted as a duel of giants, simply never happens. Asbridge reminds us that this was as much about narrative as battle. The idea of knight versus sultan, East versus West, was a powerful image that outlasted the actual gains of the crusade. If you remove Richard, Saladin stands unopposed as the heroic figure of this age. The West might look upon the Crusades not as struggles of honor, but as humiliations and failures. Pause for a moment and picture Europe in the aftermath. No Lionheart tales spreading in England, no epic songs about his deeds. Instead, a story of Crusader collapse, of Saladin unchallenged, of Jerusalem forever lost. Would Europe even attempt a fourth crusade in this climate? Or would the flame of crusading ideology die out decades earlier? That is the heart of this alternate timeline. Richard's absence is not just military, it's ideological. And here's where we invite you, the audience, to step in. What do you think? If Richard never set sail, would another leader rise to fill his shoes? Or was his presence so unique that history itself bends around his absence? Drop your theories in the comments. We want to hear them. Because Vertex of Time is about exploring not only what was, but what might have been. And if you want to see your own suggestion featured in a future video, like at MadRien Gaming 498, you think Waltz's idea today? Don't hesitate to share. Now, let's push this scenario further. If Saladin's supremacy went unchallenged, Jerusalem would remain firmly under Muslim control. Negotiations, truces, and pilgrim rights that Richard secured in reality, like the deal allowing Christian pilgrims access to holy sites, would never happen. Instead, the Holy City would be closed to Western Christendom. According to Stephen Runciman in A History of the Crusades, the survival of the Pilgrim Road was as vital to the soul of Europe as the survival of its armies. Cut off that access, and you cut off one of the main arteries of medieval spirituality. Imagine the shockwaves across Christendom. England, too, would be very different. Without Richard's crusading fame, his brother John would not live in his shadow. John might rise earlier, consolidating power before the crisis that gave birth to the Magna Carta. English identity, so bound up in the Lionheart myth, would evolve in another direction. Perhaps John, remembered as the villainous king who clashed with his barons, would have defined the monarchy earlier and with even harsher consequences. The ripple effects extend even to modern memory. Our culture often remembers the Crusades through Richard and Saladin, clash of chivalry and rivalry, almost romanticized. Without it, perhaps the Crusades would be remembered solely as disasters. Perhaps the very idea of holy war would be stripped of its aura, seen only as folly. Let's stop here for a call to action. If you've made it this far, you know that alternate history is more than just speculation. That's a way of understanding the weight of individuals, choices, and accidents in shaping our world. If this fascinates you, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and join us here at Vertex of Time. Because here, we don't just ask what happened, we ask what could have happened, and what if it happened differently. Don't miss future explorations. Subscribe, like, and keep this journey alive. Now, for the final act of our alternate history. With no Richard, Europe returns from the east, demoralized. Saladin becomes a legend, not just in the Muslim world, but as the unquestioned victor of the crusading age. Western Europe might redirect its aggression inward. Earlier, perhaps, the Albigensian Crusade in France begins sooner, or political wars in Italy erupt with even greater ferocity. The papacy, robbed of crusading glory, loses prestige decades before the Reformation. The very balance of medieval Europe shifts, and in this world, the idea of Christian chivalry the knight, with cross upon his chest, fades. Much earlier, leaving behind only bitter memories of failure. So, as we close, remember this. History is not inevitable. It is a fragile chain of events, where one absence, one choice, one death, can bend the course of civilizations. Without Richard the Lionheart, the Third Crusade may not be remembered as a tale of resilience, but as the final nail in the coffin of Christian hopes in the Holy Land. The what if here is monumental, and it forces us to reflect on how thin the line is between triumph and collapse. This is Vertex of Time, where history meets imagination, where we turn the page of what was and sketch the outline of what could have been. Subscribe today, and never miss a chance to travel beyond the timeline. Because here, every story has another side, every past has another path, and every age offers another possibility. Until next time, keep questioning, keep imagining, and keep walking with us through the Vertex of Time.